So when you dig into the life of Joseph Smith, you find these two massive, monumental projects. First, you've got the Book of Mormon, this whole new scripture he said he translated from golden plates. And then there's his revision of the Bible, which we now call the Joseph Smith translation. But here's the thing, the way he produced them couldn't be more different. And that difference creates a really fascinating puzzle.
I mean, think about that for a second. The speed, the pace for these two projects is just wildly different. And this is the kind of thing that has fueled debate for, nearly 200 years now? Digging into it really forces us to confront the core question of who Joseph Smith actually was. The contrast is just stark. On one hand, you have the Book of Mormon, produced in this absolute whirlwind. Most scholars agree it took somewhere between 60 and 90 working days to create an entirely new, really complex story. Then, on the other hand, you have his Bible project, which was just revising a book that already existed, and that stretched on for about 3 years. So what gives? Okay, so to solve this puzzle, we really have to look at the two main schools of thought. Because depending on your starting assumptions about Joseph Smith, the very same evidence can lead you to completely different, but, internally logical conclusions. So here are the two foundational viewpoints. A skeptical or naturalistic view basically says Joseph Smith was a creative author. From that perspective, the super slow pace on the Bible needs some kind of practical explanation. The believer's view, though, starts from a totally different place. It starts with the premise that he was a prophet, and that the whole process was guided by divine revelation, which, has its own logic and its own timing. So from a skeptical angle, think about it. Altering the King James Bible, the most revered book in the English-speaking world, that was a high-stakes game. One wrong move could totally destroy his credibility. So it would require careful, systematic work. But from the believer's view, the process was completely different. Revelation wasn't some sudden download of information. It was more like a conversation, where God revealed truths line upon line, often as Joseph was studying the text and asking very specific questions. All right, so we've explored the why of the slow pace, but what was he actually doing for 3 whole years? What kind of changes did the Joseph Smith translation make to the Bible? Because let me tell you, it was way more than just fixing typos. Yeah, these revisions were deeply theological. He added entirely new sections, like a huge prophecy from Joseph of Egypt about a future seer who would also be named Joseph. He made these subtle but absolutely crucial changes to passages in Genesis and Revelation to really hammer home that the Father and the Son are distinct beings, which is a core part of his theology. He even reworked verses in Romans to push back against popular Calvinist ideas of predestination, and instead focused on human agency. This was a project of serious theological reshaping. Now, to really see this tension between the skeptical and the faithful views play out, we can zoom way in on one of the most dramatically altered passages in the entire project, Isaiah chapter 29. And folks, this is where the debate gets really sharp. Okay, so here's a key verse from the King James Bible. It speaks poetically about a sealed book. Now, for the early Latter-day Saints, this wasn't just pretty language. They believed it was a literal prophecy about the Book of Mormon. And Joseph Smith's revisions were about to make that connection way more explicit. The change is just radical. Where the King James Version is brief and poetic, the Book of Mormon's version blows it up into this detailed story. It adds specific dialogue, it gives motives to the characters, and it even throws in a prophecy about witnesses to the book, none of which is in the biblical original at all. So for believers, this expanded text is seen as a direct prophecy of a huge event in their history. Martin Harris, one of the early followers, taking a transcript of characters from the golden plates to this learned professor, Charles Anthon, who couldn't translate them. The story in the expanded Isaiah 29 matches the details of that encounter perfectly. And this brings us right to the core dilemma. Is this perfect match a sign of divine foreknowledge, or is it something else? Let's take a look at the closing arguments from both sides. All right, so the skeptical argument finds these changes highly suspicious for 3 main reasons. First, the prophecy fits Joseph Smith's own story so perfectly, it seems almost too convenient, like a kind of retroactive validation. Second, there's zero support for these additions in any ancient manuscripts, like the Dead Sea Scrolls. And third, the style and the theology of these new verses, they sound remarkably similar to Joseph Smith's other known writings. They have his distinct theological fingerprints all over them, suggesting they all came from the same author. But the faithful argument sees this as totally acceptable. From this point of view, prophets don't just repeat ancient text. They reveal its meaning for us, for a modern audience. Joseph wasn't acting like an academic translator.
He was a seer, providing what you might call an inspired commentary. So that perfect match isn't suspicious at all. It's proof of divine orchestration. It's evidence that God actually used Isaiah to foretell the events of the restoration. So we're kind of left at an impasse, aren't we? We have two coherent but mutually exclusive explanations for the exact same set of facts: the slow pace of the Bible translation and the radical changes he made inside of it. It all really hinges on this one interpretive leap. So, was Joseph Smith's treatment of the Bible, especially a chapter like Isaiah 29, an act of prophetic genius that uncovered truths that were hidden for millennia? Or was it a convenient retrofitting of Scripture, designed to validate his own modern mission? Ultimately, the answer really just depends on the lens through which you choose to view the evidence.